Thank you, Diane. Our next speaker is Robert Bateman.
Gracie, Galloways, Colonel Crandall, Colonel Martin, assembled friends. As you are able, would you please stand up? All right, so shake your arms a little bit. All right, you want to hop around a little bit, get the energy going. Take a deep breath, let it out. Okay, take your seat, thank you. Hello, I'm Bob Bateman. You may wonder why I just asked you to do that. It's not exactly a normal thing at a memorial service. I see that, but this is not going to be your normal eulogy. So we needed to shift things up a little bit. I should warn you, I have special dispensation from our ranger pastor for what I'm about to do. I'm not sure that I'll get it from the high. There will be swearing, there will be off-colored jokes, and some frankly offensive innuendo coming up. And that's just the parts where I'm quoting Joe. You might wonder why this guy who's young enough to be one of Joe's sons is up here, let alone giving an entirely unserious presentation. The fact of the matter is that this onus was laid upon me by Joe years and years and years ago when we were housemates. One of the things you learned about Joe, if you ever lived with him, is how the sausage is actually made. One evening I was peering over his shoulder as he very painfully typed an email. When I commented, "You know, Joe, I know we both type about 60 words a minute, and we can both sight type. But at least I use 5 fingers and you only use 3. Fuck you, Bateman. He didn't even look up. Now I knew I had him. It was time to reel him in. Be careful, old man, I warned him. Someday it will be me writing the words that become your legacy. I'll be ghostwriting your eulogy, then I'll write the book from which they'll make a movie about you. Of course, you're going to be animated in that movie. And can you just tell me how it sounds when you say, my precious? That made him stop. He turned in his chair, looked at me quite seriously, and said, fuck 'em, Bates. Just make 'em laugh. And so here I am, to tell you about towels and sarongs and tomatoes, and the many uses of the word fuck. Sorry, guy. We are here today gathered in the memory of our friend, beloved husband and father, mentor, respected colleague, Joseph Lee Galloway. Author, war correspondent, domestic and international journalist, tireless advocate for the common man in and out of uniform. We've already heard 3 moving accounts of his numerous accomplishments. Many here today, upon first hearing the news of Joe's passing, reacted with sadness and grief. Me, all I could think was, I'll never get that last month's rent from him. The outlines of Joe's life are well known. He was married to his first wife for 30 years as he covered events that would rock many a lesser man. Or as he described it to me, 7 wars, 3 riots, and a lynching. About Joe's second marriage, I won't make any jokes nor dwell on it overmuch, except to note that it ended badly for all concerned. Not only did he experience a horrific divorce, he wound up living with me in a row house in Capitol Hill, which certainly meets the definition of adding insult to injury. When Joe and Gracie got together and then married, his joy was obvious. But I myself thought of it from 2 angles. One, of course, I was happy for Joe and Gracie, but then I was also happy for humanity. I could not stop thinking of a particular part of Shakespeare's Henry V Agincourt speech. With regard to their union, Gracie's effect on him was obvious from the beginning. On their wedding day, I thought of that line, "Be he ne'er so vile, this day shall gentle his condition." I was right. Although Joe traveled and lived around the world, he was perpetually only from one place, Texas. If you knew Joe for more than a few hours, you knew how proud he was of his Texas roots and his familial heritage. One story most of you have probably heard, quite a few of us repeatedly, was about his great-great-grandfathers. They both fought in the American Civil War. Each of them lost a leg, one the right leg, one the left leg. Joe loved telling the story of how they would meet up once a year, go into town, and buy a single pair of boots. Joe and I originally met through writing. I was a young infantry captain. Joe was already a famous war correspondent and author. I'd read his first book, Triumph Without Victory, about the fight in the Gulf War in 1991 when I returned from a tour in the Sinai. So for me, it was initially quite humbling to merely correspond with him, especially considering what I was watching happening as our writing gradually morphed into a deeper friendship. Joe was nearly single-handedly pulling off something only a few generals in all of American history have ever managed. He was effectively changing the culture, attitudes, doctrine, even the policy of the entire United States military. As many here know, in the wake of the Vietnam War, there was a profound sense of distrust, even to the point of acrimony, between the military and the media. This was most famously displayed in the low point of Grenada in 1983 when the military totally shut the media out of contact with the soldiers and Marines on the ground. Over the next 20 years, Joe, in 1,000 ways, gradually changed that attitude within the military and no doubt to a degree within journalism. As Joe put it to me, the reason the two sides had been at such loggerheads was because it was really like a fight between brothers, each of who devoutly believed that he was responsible for protecting democracy and liberty. And though, over time, we all know that both sides were right, the brothers couldn't see that. And there is no fight so vicious as one between brothers. So over time, in his writing for millions, Joe gradually chipped away. And over individual meetings with soldiers and officers and other journalists, I won't say over 1 million scotches, but it maybe approached that, Joe chipped away more. In the end, it was really Joe who made the embedding program that the military shifted to, a concrete effort to put every reporter who wanted to be on the ground to spend real significant time with the troops into a unit in the field. Relinking America's people with their soldiery in the sure knowledge that nobody can serve with troops on the front line in combat and not fall in love with them. So we spent a lot of time writing and talking. A few months after Joe moved in with me, sipping scotch on that tiny back patio in Capitol Hill row house, we now shared, and looking back at the shit show that had been 2003, domestically and internationally, I mentioned that it had been the very definition of an annus horribilis, a horrible year. Joe nodded, but when he agreed, he deepened his Texas accent, which he didn't always do, calling it an anal horribilis, which I am pretty sure was intentional. On another point, I know that this part got much better with Gracie, but Joe could be, let's say, sometimes casual with his appearance. Once I was about to drop some of my uniforms off at the dry cleaner a couple blocks away, and know that Joe was going to be meeting some important person in the near future, I suggested I maybe might take some of his things to the dry cleaners to get pressed. Joe looked up from the book he was reading and deadpanned, "Bates, I buy them specially pre-rumpled." Then there's the issue of tomatoes. Maybe future historians better than I, or more likely psychoanalysts of the future will be able to figure this one out, but I never will. See, whenever Joe had the chance, wherever he lived, he would garden. He would plant a couple different plants, but his pride and joy was always the tomatoes. No matter where he lived, and I visited him everywhere that he lived from 1993 forward, the first thing I'd do if I was visiting him in the spring or summer would be to drag me outside and show me his plot of tomatoes. When he lived in what he called the farm in Northern Virginia, I swear, he must have had 60 plants. And if you think about that, that's nearly 6,000 tomatoes at the end of the season. Even in that little backyard in DC, we planted a few in pots where there was sun. And what he did with them, I don't know. It's not like he was Anthony Bourdain. I never saw the man cook. I never saw him dehydrate or make a pasta, nothing. But man, he loved to grow them. And tomatoes, I now know because I caught the bug from him, are about the most labor-intensive plant or vegetable you can possibly grow. They require a very specific, slightly acidic soil. They require a huge amount of weeding and then constantly, every day, plucking at them to make sure that they devote their growth to the fruits and not growing out to the side or 7 feet tall. I swear to God, if Joe had put that much effort into growing weed, he'd have been a billionaire. And then there are the towels. How to paint this picture? See, I have to paint it for you because you could pour bleach on my cerebellum and I wouldn't be able to put it away. You get up early. You pad quietly down the stairs as best you can in your 19th century house, so as not to wake anyone. But then you see the light is already on, so you stride into the kitchen, and there's Joe Galloway, buck-ass naked except for a towel. A very large bath towel he's wearing around his waist as he makes the first pot of java of the day. Hair slicked back from the shower, he nods and walks away with his cup. Okay, fine. But then he'd stay like that for hours. I secretly suspect that he wanted to be a nudist, but his 1950s South Texas upbringing just wouldn't let him do it. But he sure was comfortable in that towel. As for me, that was fine. You know, locker rooms and such, I understand that. My occasional house guests, such as my fiancée and my mother, not so much the first few times it happened to them. Gracie tells me that he was much more refined when he was with her. Apparently, he'd upgraded from my bath towels to 2 particularly favored sarongs. Now, finally, a word about cussing, and I know that the youth I've been cleared for the youth, and maybe they're wearing earmuffs. I'm going to speak about Joe's relationship with the word fuck. Now, in the culture where Joe grew up, and in the 2 cultures that he took as his own, swearing is not really held in opprobrium. Indeed, far from it. South Texas and journalism and the military, and particularly the infantry, the ability to convey emotions colorfully is quite valued. Right, Pastor? Rodin worked in marble. Beethoven in the ebb and flow of pitch and timbre. Writers work in the written word, but people like, say, Command Sergeant Major Basil Plumley, were and are artists in the verbal uses of combinations of swear words and the unnatural to such a degree that it could make the very ears of angels in heaven bleed. Joe wanted to be able to do that. He really, really did. He just couldn't. For some ineffable reason, my friend, the self-taught master of the written word, was mostly left with only that one word, fuck. But with that one word, my friend created a palette that could convey nearly every human emotion. You've heard me quote Joe directly a few times now, so you get the picture. Like Galileo and Michelangelo's gorgeous, incredible pen and ink drawings, Joe created shadow and light, texture and emptiness, but not with black ink. That single word, fuck. Listening to him for long stretches on the phone during low points in his life. Fuck. Could convey all the sadness of a Shakespearean tragedy. When the roles reversed and I was spilling to him about the breakup of my marriage, his, "Oh, fuck, Bates," conveyed true and deep empathy. The day he called me to be the first to tell me that Rick Rescorla was probably dead, fuck, was our mutual expression of sorrow. In his time of tribulation with his second wife, and just about any time he used the name Cheney or Rumsfeld, we can all understand what he meant by fucker there. And at least a few times a day when I knew he was reading the news, because I'd hear coming out of the other room, "The fuck?" The list goes on, but as near as I can tell, Joe successfully deployed that single word to mean sadness, empathy, sorrow, anger, disdain, laughter, approval, confusion, admiration, and even love. That list is not all inclusive, but my friend, who I miss with all my heart, got at least 11 meanings from one word. No man can do better. Rest in peace, you fucker.